Hi everyone. Just like last week, we are still working on fairy tales for writing, and we'll continue working on fairy tales throughout the rest of the year. Last week, we asked you to look at a couple traditional fairy tales that you're familiar with, and then asked you to look at the structure of their story. So, who were the characters? What was the setting? What was the problem and the solution? What are some things that you notice about fairy tales? Those kind of things. So this week we're going to start looking at fractured fairy tales. These fairy tales are very similar to their traditional. They just kind of have a spin and a twist to the traditional. So it sounds similar, but there are many differences. This week we're going to have you look at a couple of different fractured fairy tales, and you are going to work on comparing the two. So this week you just got done listening to Prince Cinders. So this is what we're going to work on this week, and this is what I'm going to model for you, comparing Cinderella from last week to Prince Cinders this week. Okay. All right, so the easiest way to do this is to create like a T-chart. And I have an example right here, and I know it's very wordy, but I tried to keep it as simple as possible. So let me just kind of show you how I did my T-chart, and you can start thinking about how you can do your T-chart for the must-do activities this week. So I broke it into your character setting, the magic that happens, your big event 1, 2, and 3, and then how does your story end? And remember, with these 3 big events, you're not telling me every single little detail. You're just going to share the big things that happen in the story. There should be about 3 big events. So let me show you how I did this. And compare your structure from Cinderella to my T-chart for Cinderella, and just see how similar or different that we have. Okay, so my Cinderella characters are Cinderella, the prince, the 2 stepsisters, and the stepmother. Okay, and I also labeled that they're good and evil. Okay, our story took place in a castle where the ball was, and then it also took place at Cinderella's home. Okay, we had some magic going on, thanks to our fairy godmother. Okay, she turned a pumpkin into a golden coach, which was like a wagon. And then she turned the mice and rats into fancy horses. She turned the lizards into footmen. Okay, and then she turned Cinderella's rags that she was wearing into a beautiful gown. All right, and then my first big event was that the prince hosts a ball that the stepsisters attend, and then with magic, Cinderella was also able to attend. Okay, that was the first big thing that happened, was the ball. Okay, then Cinderella loses her slipper at the ball, and the prince searches to find the owner of this glass slipper. He wants to find out who Cinderella was. My last big event was that the prince sees the glass slipper fit Cinderella, and so then they got married. And my ending was happily ever after. Okay, and before you watched this mini lesson, you watched Prince Cinders, and here's kind of how they compare. Their stories were very similar, but there were so many differences to keep it special to Prince Cinders. So instead of Cinderella, I had Prince Cinders. Instead of the prince, I had Princess Lovepenny. And instead of my stepsisters, I had 3 hairy brothers. Okay? Instead of the ball at the castle, we went to the disco in Prince Cinders, and then we also it also took place at Prince Cinders' home. All right, my magic in Prince Cinders, instead of having a fairy godmother, I had a dirty fairy. Instead of having the pumpkin turned into a golden coach, she turned a soda can into a car, a very tiny car. She turned Prince Cinders' rags into a suit. And then she made sure that he turned big and hairy like his brothers. But it didn't quite end up the way he wanted, right? The first big event was, instead of them going to the ball with a prince, they would take the princesses to a disco. And with magic, Prince Cinders was able to go to the disco too. Okay, instead of Cinderella losing her glass slipper and the prince searching for that, the princess got scared of a big hairy monkey and she wanted to find her hero, and the hero lost his pants. Okay, so she's looking for the owner of the pants instead of the owner of the glass slipper. In event 3, Prince Cinders is the one that fits into the pants, and so Princess Lovelady proposes and they get married. And then they live happily ever after. So you can see my T-chart. It was very easy to help me compare the traditional fairy tale Cinderella to the fractured Prince Cinders with all of these key elements of a fairy tale. Okay. Myself and the rest of the third grade ELA teachers, we tried to help compile a list of different stories that you can look for, traditional and fractured. So instead of the 3 little pigs, you have like the 3 little beavers, the 3 little kittens, the 3 little recyclers, the 3 little armadillo tough, and so on. And so this is what we want you to use this week as you are looking for traditional and fractured fairy tales to compare with your T-charts. And you can find these on Epic, Raz Kids, and other reading resources. So here's your must-do number 3 this week. We want you to start thinking about your fractured fairy tale. You're going to create one of your own. So I want you to think about different fairy tales, and I want you to explore the different fairy tales this week using this slide with the different examples. And there's so many more options other than these. These are just a few. And we want you to pick your favorite fairy tale that you might want to fracture. Okay, and the reason we ask you to choose your favorite fairy tale, 1, you'll have fun with it, and 2, with it being your favorite fairy tale, it should be one of the ones that you're an expert on. Okay, and you're going to use the T-chart that I showed you in the previous slide to think about your changes from the traditional fairy tale to you creating your own fractured fairy tale. So some of the things you're going to think about are your characters, your setting, your problem solution, those 3 big events that create the story, and then the magic that happens. So go ahead and get started with this, and you can see more examples of this in your choice word for week